Hi guys, so today, or in this video, I want to kind of talk about kind of clarifying the most important things in terms of your nutrition that you need to do for fat loss, and kind of, because I know it's very confusing. I know I get about 20 different opinions each day which kind of tend to conflict with each other, but this is should help you kind of clarify things and kind of organise what's most important, more important, kind of put it into a hierarchy as well. So I think that's probably the biggest problem we've got at the moment, is there tends to be a lot of very conflicting, polarised ideas, and the reality is that really we need to kind of approach them more in kind of like a hierarchical fashion in terms of what will give you the best results quickly in terms of nutrition. So what I've done, which I'll flash up on the screen now, is I put together just a real basic pyramid diagram, just to kind of clarify. This is obviously my understanding, and definitely what I've learned from working myself, working with clients as well, as to what brings the best results in the quickest time, and also actually helps you maintain your results as well. So if we look at the bottom of the pyramid, we've got calorie balance. So I would definitely say, and I definitely believe that this is the most important aspect for fat loss. So this is where we need to distinguish between fat loss and health, because healthy people aren't necessarily lean and lean people aren't necessarily healthy, especially the sort of people that diet down to sort of 5 or 6% body fat. It's probably not the best thing in terms of long-term health, but for short periods it's fine. So most important thing is calorie balance. So what I mean by that is balancing the calories that come in for the food that you decide to eat, versus the amount of calories that you expend through your natural day-to-day metabolism, plus any activity that you choose to do as well. So very basically, if we eat a certain amount of calories, say for example on the top of my head, say you're eating 1500 calories a day, and then your metabolism plus the activity you do for the day is something like 1750, then that little 250 calorie deficit will provide you with a nice solid fat loss. Obviously it's a little bit debatable when it comes down to like chronic dieters, like people who've been doing that all year round, because you're probably going to find metabolism is very sluggish, in which case I would say like a calorie controlled or a diet necessarily, a calorie deficit probably isn't the best thing to do straight off the bat. You might need to spend some time, a little bit more calories, keep metabolism going and then start again. But for 99% of people, it's making sure you get that calorie balance right. I generally tend to find for most men will generally overeat slightly, and most women generally tend to undereat. So what you'll find is, especially for women, is if I work out the calories that they need for their fat loss, usually find actually eating slightly more food than they would do normally. And if anything as well, they're going to have to work on more nutritious foods, nutritionally dense foods as well, which tend to be a bit more filling for them, so they don't feel starving all the time. Obviously, you've got to be really careful. One of my bugbears is when we look at kind of calorie balance, especially things like a very low carb diet for long periods. Is I think it tends to. There's two things. One thing, as I tend to think, is that it kind of lulls you, especially with some of the stuff that you see on Facebook. It kind of almost gets you into the point where you think you can eat unlimited amounts of fat, which isn't true, because one of the big arguments for a low carb diet is that you're not spiking insulin, which is, and the key word is one of the fat storage hormones in our body. The idea is that if you're not stimulating insulin, therefore you'll be prone to storing less fat. Not quite as simple as that, and I feel like that's one of the dangers when we look at hormones in kind of isolation. So one of the counter arguments to that is that if insulin is probably the main hormone in terms of fat storage when you eat a lot of carbohydrates, there is in fact actually another protein or peptide called acylation stimulation protein, or ASP, which is actually released by fat cells themselves in response to fat in your diet. So you can see that if you switch take all the carbs out of your diet and switch to a high fat diet, it is still entirely possible to store fat, which from a evolutionary standpoint definitely makes sense. Obviously when we were all cave dwellers and hunters, there might be periods that you wouldn't have eaten any carbohydrate, but your body would still need some mechanism to store fat, so that you had some extra energy stores if there was no food around at all. So, you know, one of the dangers, obviously, if you look at just pure carbohydrates, is there are other mechanisms for your body to store fat. So what we still need to do is we still need to look at that calorie balance. Regardless of what your macronutrient makeup is, if you're not in the right calorie balance, and that also goes if you're way too low as well. You know, I like to think that, say, we work out your total calorie needs for the day is, I don't know, something like 2,000 just to stay the same. So that's to maintain, not to lose any weight or any fat. We want a deficit of around about 200 to 300 initially is probably the best bet. And at the very, very most, I certainly wouldn't go any more than 500 calories underneath. And even then, I wouldn't start straight at 500 calories. I'd probably start at 200, then we go to 300, then go to 400, and maybe 500 calories deficit, and for no longer than about 12 weeks or so. I think one of the mistakes a lot of people do when they do understand this energy balance and deficit is they tend to go too hard too soon. And the trouble with that is that you'll get a great result from maybe a couple of weeks, but then obviously because your metabolism is adaptive, things will start to slow down. You'll hit a brick wall, and the trouble is because you've already taken out 500 calories with what I call a self-healthy range. You've got nowhere else to go then, except maybe add in loads more activity. So you kind of, lost your options. So I would definitely say is that once you understand that calorie balance is important, like I said, 200 to 300 calorie deficit is about right to get you going, and kind of stick within that range until you start to hit a sticking point. So I definitely think the best idea is to be able to lose fat as many calories as possible, because then long term you have less of these problems with your adaptive metabolism becoming too slow. If that's what happens with chronic diet, is you diet all year round, the metabolism just becomes a complete slug, and then they can be eating like 1,000 calories a day and still be putting on weight. So we've got to kind of look at it through the lens of, we need a calorie deficit, but we've also got to be smart about how we apply that calorie deficit. And that's why I think it's always worth, if you've got a coach who can be objective about what's going on, they can just track your results and then give you, a suitable diet plan to give you that calorie deficit. But on that diagram you see, I've put like a little asterisk next to calorie balance, because what I would put with that, which is equally as important, probably not for everybody, probably maybe out of 1 of every 10 clients has this issue, and that's if you have any serious digestive issues. Also, if you can't break down and absorb your food, then obviously you're not going to be absorbing very many calories, so that in itself is going to cause problems in terms of calorie balance. Again, realistically, that only affects, in my experience, probably 1 out of 10, every 10 clients. So certainly doesn't affect everybody by any means at all. Just something that needs to be taken into consideration. Again, working with a smart coach, that's something I would take into consideration if I do see problems like that. But again, very small percentage of people have that problem. It's still far more important to get that calorie balance right. Again, 200 to 300 calorie deficit initially, and that will certainly get you going. Okay, so next above that, as I would say then, is your macronutrient ratios. So your macronutrients are your proteins, your carbohydrates and your fats. So they're the nutrients you have in your biggest percentages in your diet. As a very rough guide, if you're going for fat loss, studies have shown that you want to kind of bump your protein up a little bit, because that tends to spare your lean mass, which is obviously your muscle mass, which in turn will help protect your metabolism. So I would say, the things that I've tried and what's with clients and what I'm using myself at the moment for the 8-week challenge, is I'm going about 40% protein, 30% carbs, 30% fats. Another note is to make with fats as well is that fats are obviously very important things, especially like our sex hormones. Also help with satiety as well, and kind of general energy. I probably wouldn't go too far below about 25% fat as probably a bare minimum. Like I said, I'd prefer really keep it 30% year round, regardless of whether you're trying to put on muscle, lose fat, get lean, whatever you want to do. I would definitely keep your fats around about 30%. Kind of protect sex hormone production, and just keep everything balanced in the body. And what I tend to do really is play around more the proteins and the carbs if I need to take stuff out and reduce calories and change macronutrient ratios around. So 40% protein, 30% carbs, 30% fats is a good macronutrient ratio for fat loss. In my experience, it works very well, gives you a nice even balance. Again, as with any decision you make, there's always a trade-off. in theory, going a very low carb diet is theoretically easier to live by because you just cut your carbs out. It's a very easy thing to apply in terms of understanding it. Trouble is, if you do go very low carb, it tends to affect your thyroid and hormones and brain function and all the rest of it. So again, there's a trade-off. That's why, in my experience, the best thing I found for fat loss is 40% protein, 30% carbs, 30% fats, and then just monitor your calories as you go along. Okay, so above macronutrients ratios, we've then got your micronutrients. So this is, I guess, is what you could sum up as food quality. So, for example, 1,000 calories worth of ice cream has very little micronutrients in terms of vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients compared to 1,000 calories made up of like lean proteins, vegetables, and some starchy carbohydrates. So this is important in terms of long-term health. Obviously, you're going to enjoy better long-term health if you've got micronutrient-rich foods in your diet. But in terms of fat loss, it's not as important as your calorie balance and your macronutrient ratios, although it still does help contribute to it. But you still, whatever happens, you've got to get that calorie balance right and within a smart area to be in terms of fat loss, not being too extreme. Next above that is what we call nutrient timing. So this is kind of this has been kind of big thing in the past 2 years. I've noticed on Facebook. There's a lot of coaches that swear by nutrient timing. So what they mean by that is timing. Usually it's more to do with when you have your carbohydrates or the bulk of your carbohydrates. So the argument there is that if you have carbohydrates before, after, and possibly during your workouts, you'll have more energy. Therefore, you'll work out harder. And get a better result. It's more to do really if you're into kind of bodybuilding, put on as much muscle as possible, possibly for strength as well, more so than it is for fat loss that I've heard it. Again, some people say it's a little bit debatable. I generally feel a little bit like I've got better energy if I have some carbs before training. But it's one of those things you have to try it for yourself and experiment with it. But again, whatever happens, that is just a drop in the ocean compared to having the right calorie balance. Like I said, I think part of this video is a lot of people, is because so much conflicting information out there. I think there tends to be an emphasis on sweating what I would call the small stuff. So looking at things like complicated, fantastical sounding ideas like nutrient timings. It's got amazing, interesting. Oh, what's that? It sounds intriguing. But really, this is nowhere near as important as getting your calorie balance right. If you're eating, overeating by 1,000 calories a day, but you've shoved all your carbs around training, you're still going to get fat. This is the way it works. Then last but no means least, kind of the cherry on top of the cake really, is supplements. We never forget supplements are supplemental, especially in my opinion, to a good diet. However, I have put an asterisk by that because there's one slight caveat. That is if, and it generally happens in that 1 in 10 clients who has some serious digestive issue, you might find they're horrendously deficient in basics. And the basics things that I mean are like probably the first most important, probably zinc, especially for men. Then magnesium, best both for men and women. Then possibly vitamin D if you don't go out in the sun a lot. And then I would say your omega-3 fats, or omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, especially if you don't tend to eat a lot of oily fish. And again, these things are more to do with long-term health. They'll certainly help with a fat loss plan because they kind of help keep you balanced and they make things easier and you're less prone to cravings, you tend to sleep better and stuff. But again, like I said, there's, especially with Facebook, there's a lot of focus on these. A lot of coaches put up these things to try and grab people's attention. A new study shows that fish oil is vitally important, or vitamin D is vitally important to fat loss, because it kind of sounds interesting, it sparks interest, and people like the article and they share it, and it kind of makes people sound important because they kind of understand something semi-scientific. Again, the trouble is that these things, in my experience, probably at most like a 5% difference if your calorie balance is right. And again, I see a lot of people that kind of focus on these sweating the small stuff, these small details, like, oh, my vitamin D level was this, magnesium was this, but zinc was this. This level I got, that was all right, but I still didn't lose fat. It's because your calorie balance was all over the shop. It's one of those things as well. If you're the sort of person that you feel like you eat very, very healthily, but you're not getting anywhere in terms of fat loss, it's because you haven't followed the most important rule, and that's getting your calorie balance right. It's entirely possible if you've eaten the most healthy foods on earth and still overeat. That's entirely possible, so you have to make sure we're in that nice little pocket for fat loss in terms of calorie balance, and you're sensible about not making sure it's not too great a deficit and you're not too far over. You're in that nice zone, and then you just monitor and be objective as you go along. Obviously, say for example you would do like an 8 or 12 week kind of transformation challenge. What you'll find, what a lot of coaches will do, especially online, is they'll start you off on like a 200 calorie deficit, and you'll probably do great for 2, maybe 3 weeks or so. And then what they'll do is they'll look to slightly increase that as your metabolism, obviously, because now you're here some of your calories, you've dropped 200, and over that 2 to 3 week period your metabolism is adaptive and you're kind of stalled out in terms of your results. They'll look to increase that calorie deficit in some way. It might only be by 100 calories or so for that week, and they'll either drop the calories in terms of what you're eating, or they'll increase your activity by about 100 calories or so. They'll throw an extra 30 to 40 minute walk somewhere, and that'll kind of just kickstart you again. Obviously that approach is brilliant if you're really like an 8 to 12 week kind of transformation period, something like that. Probably not the best for all year round. The best idea, in my opinion, for year round is to do it in phases. So do your 8 to 12 week fat loss phase, get as lean as you can, and then what I would do is I would start to bring your calories up a little bit, slowly for a couple of weeks, and try and overshoot where you were before, and then see if you can get to the point where you can maintain your body fat at that higher amount of calories for like 8 to 12 weeks again, and then go for another 8 to 12 weeks of fat loss. And because, say before, your metabolism at 2,000 calories when you very first start, before your first fat loss period, you drop down to, say, eventually 1,600 calories, and then you build yourself back up on the next phase up to like 2,200, say, and then you began your fat loss at 2,000 calories, and you came down. And what's going to happen over time is if you do that zigzag approach, is that eventually you'll actually build your metabolism up. So over the course of a year, your metabolism, just to say might be at 2,000, but over the course of a year you might build it up to 2,600, say. And in that period you're going to find you're going to carry more lean muscle mass, your metabolism is going to get a lot faster, you have more energy, you can train harder, quality of life's going to be better. And then you find, once you get to the end of the year and you get to 2,600 calories and you're maintaining, that's when it becomes ridiculously easy to drop body fat, in an instant. And people that do get the best results really quickly, it's because they got, metabolism's healthy, but got a very fast metabolism, and they've got that very sensible approach to doing the fat loss, and they're not trying to starve themselves all year round. So that's one of the things I've learned from people like, for example, Joseph C. Donnelly. He's a very famous men's physique model, does a lot of stuff for like Fitness RX and Men's Health and Men's Fitness. And that's kind of what he does. Like, his metabolism is mental. I think he lives off about 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day, and maintains body fat year round about 8%. And then when he needs to drop it a little bit leaner for a photo shoot, to 5%, he just has a little bit of a diet. Diet drops 200 calories for 2 weeks, and he hits 5% very easily. And at no point does he feel like crap and he's got no energy. He can still train all the way through. So that's what you want. If you want to get to the point where you can be 5-6% body fat, that's what you want to do kind of long term. One of the things also I'd say is there's a big thing, especially if you come from me, coming from a very strong Poliquin background, with a low carb idea. In my experience, kind of the leanest I ever got, purely following like a very strict low carb approach, was about 10 to 12%. I might be able to find a picture and stick up there for you. I certainly didn't get down to 5-6% on that approach. There was a trade-off. I did feel like I had zero training energy for a long time. I think probably realistically over the past 2 years it's probably affected my energy in terms of training, kind of mental well-being, if I'm honest. Which is kind of why I might use it as a tool. I'm not bound by the rules of that approach anymore. So I say to anyone out there who was pretty lean at 10 to 12 doing a very low carb approach, you probably find that you're going to hit a brick wall there. If you do want to get leaner, I would go down the route of start to count calories, give yourself a little bit more of a slightly flexible diet, so it's good for your mental health. You probably find your metabolism will do better on it as well. But you want to be counting calories, because that's, whatever happens, that's the most important rule, is getting that calorie balance within that tolerant zone. And then just being objective with it over time. So that's the approach I've taken with the current 8-week challenge, which I myself am following. It's just to give myself initially like a 250 calorie deficit, and then I just monitor results. If I hit a brick wall at any point, I either increase my activities somewhere, or I might drop an extra 100 calories out somewhere. But just small adjustments to keep me going, rather than going mental and dropping 500 calories straight off the bat, get a great result for 2 weeks, and then just grinding to a halt for the other 6. So obviously, a quick summary. So most important, get your calorie balance right. Again, I say 200 to 300 calorie deficit is spot on. Then your macronutrient ratio, so that's your proteins, your carbs, and your fats. Again, I would go 40% protein, 30% carbs, 30% fats. Then your micronutrients, so try and fill your diet, certainly 90% of it with micronutrient dense foods. So, you know, fresh protein, starchy carbohydrates like brown rice, sweet potato, quinoa, pumpkin, that sort of stuff, because it's got more vitamins and minerals in them. Obviously, get your healthy fats in there as well. So, you know, so omega-3s like walnut oil, fish oil. Have your monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats as well. So things like avocado, olive oil, things like that as well, very important. Then I would say as a tweak on top of that is probably a nutrient timing. So I'd say if you're on a diet and you want a bit more energy training wise, I'd probably put most of your carbs kind of pre and post training if you can. So not as important, but just gives you that slight 10% increase in energy for your training. And then on top of that is supplements, so long as you haven't got an absolutely horrific calorie deficit, nutrient deficiency, but then again it's very rare, and about 1 in every 10 people. Okay, so obviously number 1 rule is the most important thing, get your calorie balance right. I would highly recommend starting to track what you eat, use a tool like MyFitnessPal, something like that. If you're consistent with your food, even on the weekends, between Monday and Sunday, Monday and the next Monday, you'll get the right result. Yeah, if you're not, especially people who tend to track their calories from Monday to Friday and then go mental on the weekend, you're not going to get the result you want. Okay, you're just going to be objective with yourself. Doesn't matter if you think you're eating healthy or not. If that calorie balance is out the window, your results are going to be out the window. Okay. Cheers. So, any questions, let me know. Hopefully this hasn't been too long a video, 21 minutes, but that kind of makes you how I understand things. Hopefully that explains that to you as well. So next time you see, some fantastical article on Facebook or the internet or in some sort of magazine, you can kind of put it into that level of understanding and say, well, yeah, that's great to have that vitamin or mineral, that supplement, this, that, or the other. But I know in my mind, I get the calorie balance right, then my macros, and then my micros, nutrients, and then I can worry about supplements and any fantastic expensive stuff I add in on top.